My name is Nduoko, and I'm here with Siti Muga and, of course, Mike Kitonga, as we are combined with the Morning Express on KTN and the Situation Room, taking a look at what's happening in the country this morning via the papers. And as we continue, of course, Siti, what do you have? Before we go to the judiciary and see what could be the problem as a crisis is looming over the lack of judges.
I don't think it's a crisis.
No?
No, I don't think so.
According to the Judicial Service Commission, they'll today have a full sitting amid a looming crisis at the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal on lack of judges due to a protracted stalemate caused by President Uhuru Kenyatta, nonetheless. In sitting, the commission will, however, not discuss Chief Justice David Maraga's forthcoming retirement, which has seen some candidates as well as players from different political divides lobbying for the seat. JSC Secretary Anna Madi yesterday confirmed that Justice Maraga's retirement is not part of the sitting's agenda, although other inside sources have indicated that it would be. So there are no judges, according to them. This stalemate has been caused by the president. There's a looming crisis. 1, 2, 3. So many things seem to be happening. And of course, we have to ask very many questions. And what's going to happen with the judicial system in the country?
Let me ask the question. How many judges have retired in the last year? I don't know the numbers, but usually it's in the papers. We know that one judge from the Supreme Court has reached retirement age and I think should have retired by now. We know that in the course of this year, the likelihood, when the Chief Justice attains the age of 70, he will also retire. If I understand it, these judges that we are speaking of were additional judges. Part of the process to expand the services that the judiciary has promised that they would. So it's additional judges.
Right.
Now, are you telling me that in the absence of these additional judges, the courts have not been able to function? The answer is no, they've been able to function. Now, they may not have been able to function as efficiently as they would want to with the additions that they have asked for. But to say that there is a crisis, then we are going to then say that we have had a crisis for as long as we can remember. Because what they're saying is this, that because the president hasn't signed this, because the president hasn't assented to this, we now have a crisis. Okay. That logic doesn't hold very much water.
But they are the ones who are saying it's a problem. Eh? It is them saying there's an issue.
If they're saying there is an issue, because they want additional judges, then it means this issue has been on for the longest time. Because remember, these judges haven't come to work.
So what you're saying, City, is that it's not a crisis, but there's a problem.
There is definitely
a problem.
There's definitely a problem.
And it's a short-staffed problem. They're
Yes.
short-staffed. They need more judges. But also the question then we should raise here, and we go back to impunity to some extent, is why has the president not signed? And I know some of the issues that he had raised at the point he was refusing to sign was the fact that he said some of the judges who have been shortlisted have questionable character.
But then why not leave those judges aside and sign in the others who do not have questionable character?
And maybe that's why now from the JSC they're saying, hey, this is a crisis because we really do not have a good reason as to why they have not been, appointed. And secondly, there doesn't seem to be an end to it. At least if the president had said, give me 2 months. And in 2 months, I'm going to sign or I'm going to, give an answer to this. But he's quiet. He's not saying anything.
Right. I mean, in this case, you got to ask because like we mentioned it yesterday, where now Kenyans are asking for justice to be expedited in very many cases. Now, to be able to make the correlation one to the other. There are no judges, that's why we have the problem. People don't want to understand. There are no judges, that's why we have the huge, because they themselves, they talk about a backlog here. They're talking about a backlog that exists. They're talking about inadequacy when it comes to capacity, not that they are not able to do the job, but that they don't have enough around the country to get the job done. A lot of people then are going to translate that to why we have all of these cases basically sitting in the corridors and collecting dust.
We've had cases pending for the longest time possible. It did not start with the promulgation of this new constitution. We've always had that problem. And since the promulgation and the independence of the judiciary, the truth of the matter is that our judges and magistrates, the numbers have increased tremendously over time. But then again, when we revamped the office of the DPP, it means many people have been brought to book.
Right.
And then we have the Anti-Corruption Commission. That people have actually asked, why don't they empower the EACE to prosecute and take them through that judicial process? Why don't they? That question remains unanswered. But what is clearly true is this: where the crisis is, if you ask me, perhaps is with the Treasury. Because if the judiciary is independent, then we assume that monies that are supposed to be allocated to them for their function should be under their purview. But it isn't. The reality is that it is doled out to them the way you give pocket money to a child. You take this, wait a little bit. Yeah, okay, now this I think should be good for you. Okay, no, take this for the week. Whereas these aren't projects that are supposed to be managed in such a manner.
They're actually not even projects, they're ongoing. And because of the backlog, the only way to sort that out is one, have enough funds to make sure that we have courts all over the country. Secondly, staff issues, have enough judges. But that, of course, doesn't seem to be happening. But now, while we're still in the corridors of justice, on page 4 of the Standard, we have Supreme Court failing to interpret integrity law. Now, I find this almost laughable because it's almost like saying or having an argument what is good manners and what is bad manners.
What should or should we not do?
Yeah,
really?
what is integrity and what is not integrity? I mean, at what point did we get to a point where we have to have integrity interpreted in a court of law? This is through the KNHCR, who have asked the court to rule whether persons found by the Auditor General to have been responsible for loss of public funds should be allowed to vie for political posts. I mean, do we need a court of law to determine that?
In this country, we do.
Why?
If you consider that even the ruling that was made famous, Justice moving even more famous, the issue of
staying away from office.
Yes, that one, my friend, still requires interpretation. What does it mean? That one. Now, this particular one...
We'll keep harping on this thing until we get an answer, right?
Yes,
or
we
until
will,
some clarity is applied here.
One, the court cannot sack a governor.
No.
All right?
No.
And because this is an elected official, there's a process by which you can get rid of this particular governor. But the court of law cannot say, now, from this point onward, you stop working. They can't do it. So what is the mechanism? You require an interpretation for it. But this one, to me, is important because if indeed someone clearly, under his purview, under his watch, things have gone wrong, they're held responsible. And since we know that our people are not in the habit of resigning or stepping aside unless they're forced, an interpretation is required. But the reason why the Supreme Court, the reason they gave was this matter is before the High Court. So they cannot wade in until the High Court has
given their
determination.
Their determination.
Yes.
Okay, but what I'm raising an issue with is, as a society, when we get to a point where we have to have interpretation for integrity, Chapter 6 of the Constitution, of course, one of the reasons why it has failed is because we all interpret it differently. But the Commission also wanted to know who between the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission and investigative agencies should investigate and determine a candidate's suitability to vie. Gray areas, particularly when it comes to candidates. But I'm wondering whether these are really truly gray areas or they're gray areas by design so that now people are able, anapita katikati yao na
right, so that then a debate can then be had later and then we can come and ask questions. It seems that it's something that should be very, very clear. Again, from the beginning. It's like somebody saying that, let's teach you then how to have manners. And then if you don't know, then come to us later. And then we can prescribe even further what is good and what is not. And you're holding yourself in a position of leadership.
No, but that is one of the functions actually of a court. That's what they're supposed to actually do. There's this law. Now, the debate comes into the applicability of that law. It's only courts that can actually determine that. And if you don't agree with the interpretation of a lower court, you go to the appellate court. That's how it works. But they are the ones who have the mandate and the function of doing precisely that. Hiyo ndio kazi yao. It's their job.
Okay, so unfortunately, I think as a society, let it suffice to say that we are so dependent on the legal law that our moral law now takes second, whereas it should be the other way around. Our moral law should be what should govern us, and where that fails, we go to court. But now it seems it's the other way around. We really don't have any morals. We have to be governed by the law, and it looks like the man was made for law, not law the man.
Not
but
law
consider the prospects of impunity and how deeply it has entrenched itself in our society, where the truth of the matter is that wrong is considered right and right is considered wrong. Because when you have a situation where whistleblowers are actually made pariahs, somebody who's saying, this is wrong, suddenly you're the villain.
You're the villain, and you're actually
all
made
you've
to
done
leave.
is say, there's a gentleman who was a whistleblower in those early days of the Anglo leasing. He's a gentleman who was in charge of, for instance, a central bank. That man was never able to get a job.
After that,
All he did was say, something's wrong
Something is amiss here.
here. And I'm in charge of this, and I feel this. Cost him. And this is a man who, in those days, not only was he educated, but he was an expert in this matter at the central bank. This is a job he lost when I think he was in his 30s.
wow.
Was never able to get
And
a
he's
job
never really
thereafter.
bounced back as a result of that.
How do you
Right.
how do you bounce
Yeah,
back?
absolutely. I think we're at a point
You
where
can't work.
all
You can't
morals
get
have
work.
been tossed. All morals have been tossed out the window. Or not really. It's not. I don't think right or wrong even has a position here. It doesn't play out here. People are doing what they need to do for their own selfish needs and aspirations, and then the question of right or wrong is not even asked. Even when people may have been, gotten caught with their fingers in the cookie jar, is really not a matter of right or wrong. It then becomes a question of how do I get out with as little as loss as possible.
When you are buffeted and you are confronted at every turn with such matters, the problem is a certain mindset takes force. So even something that may appear innocent, you now cast aspersions, you now doubt it from the very, very onset. You see, I've had an issue with one thing, for instance. I'll give you an example. Like when the government, the president signed into law this repealing of the interest rate cap. I thought there was a conflict of interest there somewhere. This is my thinking. Because it is said the president and his family also own banks, which have even become bigger with the merger of yet another medium-sized bank.
Right.
So if your family is associated, maybe not you, your family is associated, well, you have to explain how you disassociate yourself
from your family, but okay.
But when such a law comes into force, anyone who understands the smallest thing about banking will realize that there's money to be made. So you say, but is this not a conflict of interest?
It is. It is evidently conflict of interest.
Yes.
And that's why I go back to the argument that we've gone so low to a point where our moral law is no longer applicable. I'll do whatever I have to do, and where you sort. I mean, it's really up to you how
It's really up to you how you're going to interpret
to call it conflict of interest if you like, but you know what? I have the power. I have the power of the pen. I will sign, and guess what? We're going to make millions out of it, and it's, according to them, legal. It is legal. So again, if you look at it from the law, the law perspective, there's nothing illegal about it. He has the power to do it. He will sign, and money will be made.
And consider the other day, we had a situation where the government insisted that county governments had to pay what they owed to vendors. Okay?
Right.
And wonderful thing. The president said, you know something? No more development. All right? You have to pay these debts. And you're starting from way back 2013. Nothing like 2018, 2019.
Pay people what you owe them, essentially.
If you hear the stories, and these are all counties, there are no exceptions here. They are harrowing stories. People have died. Some have had diseases that have been brought about by the stress related to their businesses. Some have had properties sold. Some are on the brink of bankruptcy. Not because they're not good business people, they haven't been paid. And you want to draw this against the backdrop of the lavish lifestyles you see governors living. The properties we are told they buy, the things that we are told they do. Now, you ask yourself, goodness gracious me, when did we get to this point where it seems like any public service is like a license to steal from the very people who elected you?
Actually, I think it is. Because it is a license. I mean, let alone governors, MCAs. We have MCAs who literally go in, pretty broke, but within a year, 2 years, they are driving
loaded.
Some heavy guzzlers. And you're left wondering, wait, this is the person who went in to represent me at the very basic ward level. But somehow I am not represented, but the guy seems to be okay.
Yeah.
And until we have a conversation on how we get our moral values back, this is a debate we shall have for a very long time.
Yeah.
Of course, the conversation continues, as City likes to say. You're in the Situation in the Room this morning. We're